I know a lot of times when we're talking about SEC football, the state of California only comes up in recruiting. And more teams in the South have gone to California to get talent. And I guess you could tie it in loosely here because JT Daniels was formerly a California kid. He was at USC, transferred to Georgia. You know all that story. But I want to classify what we're about to talk about under that it means something, but we're not quite sure what it means header. I just know it doesn't mean nothing. So here's what I'm talking about. JT Daniels has been in California for a few days, going to be out there for like 10 days. Big deal. If that's where the story ended, then I would have just wasted 2 or 3 minutes of your time. But then when I read this list and I find out Demetrius Robertson's out there too, Kyrus Jackson's out there, Justin Robinson's out there, Adonai Mitchell's out there, Jermaine Burton's out there, Darnell Washington, several more of them are out there. What have we opened a satellite campus in Berkeley? Well, no, we have not. What's happened is JT Daniels has just taken half of Georgia's offense out to California to work out. These are the kinds of stories that you dismiss if your team's not doing it, and then you bathe in these kinds of stories if your team does do it. Because it makes you think that there's a togetherness and a bond and a collective buy-in, and I would argue that, yeah, that's absolutely what it indicates. Consider the 180 that Georgia football and many other programs are finding themselves in right now. When you did not have a spring and you did not have a returning quarterback and you had a brand new offensive coordinator and you had limited and interrupted installation periods and you had zero team chemistry and then you had a quarterback just throw up the deuces and bounce. What a great decision that turned out to be, by the way. There was a name noticeably absent from the NFL draft a couple of weeks ago, and it's the same one I'm talking about right now. Not to be overly critical. Consider now that we get a returning quarterback, and we got now a year under the belt of Todd Monken running this offense. Oh, by the way, that chemistry, got plenty of it, got loads of it. And also, you have unlimited install time, and if you do have limitations from the NCAA, who cares? Because your players will just say, we're going to go to California and work on some stuff. We'll be back in 10 days. That's nice. It's really nice to see. I went over to Dogs 24/7 today. I wanted to hit up the message board there, and I was asking them, what do you guys think about this? I didn't just want to ask what they thought about players going to California. What I said was, because where this is going to matter is really in result. If they're terrible this year offensively, if they're 48th in the nation, you don't really care about a trip to California in May. But I asked them to complete this sentence for me. In December, we'll be saying what about Georgia's offense? And I got several submissions. I think all of them are viable. We'll see. Some of them were more stretches than others. Best offense we've ever had. Good enough to win it all. Finally, Kirby Smart handed over the keys to Todd Monken. Offense, I thought this was a really good one from Dogscape. Offense with Daniels has a good beat, and it's easy to dance to. Now, there was also more than one poster that said, you'll be saying we were the best offense in the country. You give me top 5 or top 10, I think you guys will be fine. 2 things that I'm feeling about Georgia right now. Number one, JT Daniels is who he is. This is where I always try and caution folks. Now, there's a kind of a caveat, so I want to follow this up really quickly, because if you pause, then other people start talking, they don't hear the second part of what you say. Happened a lot last week when we were talking about point spreads. JT Daniels is who he is. What I mean by that is, this is not a guy who's only made it 60% of the way to his physical ceiling. He is who he is. So anyone who's expecting a quantum 20% leap in production or productivity, I don't think you're going to get that. You've got the player you've got. But part 2 is, that's not a problem because he wasn't terrible last year, wasn't bad. He's very good and had flashes of brilliance. And so a lot of his productivity is tied to what's around him, and you'll have easily the best stable of wide receivers, George Pickens or not, that Georgia has had under Kirby Smart. So part 2 there is, I'm not worried about that because I think if everything else falls into place personnel-wise, what JT Daniels is plenty good enough to win and do everything Georgia wants to do. But here's the second thing that I'm feeling with Georgia. 2021 could just be a delayed gratification situation. And again, I think several programs fall into this category. These changes that we're talking about, they weren't made this past offseason, guys. Kirby made a lot of these changes before 2020. The new offensive coordinator that everyone demanded that they hire, well, he did that. He didn't do it this past offseason. He did it an offseason ago. It's just that we had this thing called COVID, throw a wrench into everyone's plans. He went and got quarterbacks, JT Daniels being one of them, Jamie Newman being the other one. Off the transfer market, it didn't work out. COVID made a lot of stuff not be able to work out. I think that LSU game woke him up. That didn't happen last year. It happened 2 years ago in the SEC championship game. And I think that he went into the offseason and he was fully planning on what you'll eventually see from Georgia this year happening last year. It's just when you get spring ripped from you, and then you get a quarterback that you thought was probably going to be your starter, not be your starter. DeJuan Mathis ends up starting for you at Arkansas week 1. You get a lot of the rug pulled out from under you. You default to what you know. The fact of the matter is, what Georgia's going to be this year, I really think in his heart of hearts, Kirby had committed himself to being last year. It's just when you got Stetson Bennett pulling the trigger for you, there's a lot of stuff you can't be that you can be when JT Daniels is the man. 2020 is going to be looked at several years from now for a lot of programs. I just think Georgia may be one of them, as saying, boy, hopefully Michigan fits this description. There was a lot that we had already done and our head coach had already done that just wasn't able to play itself out in 2020. And boy, we really wrung our fists over nothing, didn't we? Not that a season doesn't matter. I know they all matter, but I just think a lot of hay was in the barn last year that you didn't get to reap the benefits of that maybe this year you will be able to.